Azul is better. I have tiles with beautiful patterns.
Sagrada is better. I have beautiful dice.
Oh, really, fool?
Really?
Hi guys, my name is Morgan from Dice on a Hill, and today we're looking at 10 different games that have some similarities between them, and they're gonna clash and head-to-head fight each other. So let's find out which one of these games will be victorious. Why don't we start by comparing Sagrada and Azul. Both of these games are entry-level games with a drafting mechanism, drafting from a shared pool of tiles or dice to complete a puzzle in front of you. Where do these ones differ? Well, Azul can be particularly cutthroat. You can be drafting in a way that you could be hurting other people by giving them tons of negative points. There's also a nice way that the tiles are drafted. As you pick out tiles, the remaining tiles in the factory spots will be pushed towards the center, giving you this sort of push your luck sort of feeling to race to the middle. If you go into the middle, you're going to be first player next round, but you're also going to be getting -1 point for doing that. But it might be worth it grabbing all those tiles. And sometimes you can get a bit greedy in this game. If you draft too many tiles and you aren't able to finish your rows, then your opponents can punish you pretty hard. And there's a lot of, this game in particular, I really enjoy as a one-on-one type of game. Really enjoyable game. All right, this one over here, Sagrada. Sagrada, on the other hand, will have you drafting dice from a shared pool. Now, what's important about these dice is their number and their color. You can never have the same color or number sitting next to each other on your player board. And this can be very tricky because sometimes you might get unlucky with these types of things. Or if you're playing against skilled opponents, they may actually be looking over at your board, seeing what kind of numbers and colors you need and be drafting those out to try and hurt you. There's also a lot of objectives that you could be trying to reach. There's some shared objectives in the middle, and then there's a favored color that you're trying to get really high numbers of to score really high points. This game also has asymmetric player boards, so they're slightly different from one another and can vary in difficulty. Choosing a more difficult board will allow you to get favor tokens, which will allow you to access tools, which are little powers that you can use to manipulate dice or change your board up. Both of these games are great games, and you can't go wrong with either one. But personal favorite, I prefer Sagrada. I just feel like there's a little bit more of a game there and a little bit more going on. So this one is my personal favorite. So, looks like Azul bites the dust. Now, the next pairing we have is Ankh, Gods of Egypt versus Kemet, Blood and Sand. Now, both of these games are area control games based on Egyptian mythology. They'll have you playing cards from your hand, and I should mention that in both of these games, the cards in your hand are identical between players, so you know all the information that your opponents have, but it's up to you to sort of think about what card would be best in that particular scenario. Where these games sort of differ are in these few things. Ankh Gods of Egypt has much bigger, more beautiful, in my opinion, miniatures. And the board presence of Ankh is next level. There's also a dynamic sort of changing to the battlefield. As the game goes on, these areas of conflict that you'll be fighting over will be divvied up, which means there'll be more conflicts occurring in your game. One thing to note, that Ankh does have one controversial rule that isn't exactly adored by everyone, and that is the merge mechanism. And for some people, this is a deal breaker. Me personally, I've enjoyed my games with that mechanism, although not everyone in the game did. But I personally find it to be an interesting mechanism and something different and interesting to play with. I should also note that both games have monsters that you can include in your games. Now, the monsters in Kemet, Blood and Sand have abilities, yes, but they're sort of simplified and they're easier to learn, yes, but on the other hand, I'm really enjoying what Ankh monsters bring to the table. Those monsters have very different abilities from one another. Although they don't have much more power than one another, all the units on the board in Ankh have one power amongst themselves. So they don't have a lot of oomph when they hit the table, but at the same time, they have very, very powerful abilities. And I think I enjoy that sort of gameplay a little bit more. On the other hand, we've got Kemet Blood and Sand, where, like I said, they've got very simple symbology. It's very easy to read the cards at a glance. You can see a card or an ability and you know exactly what it's going to do. So it's very straightforward. There's also a plethora of upgrade tiles that you could be drafting, and these make your army specific and unique to you. And I really like that aspect, but at the same time, a lot of these tiles feel a bit more simple. Whereas in Ankh Gods of Egypt, you've got a tech tree, and although everyone's tech tree is identical, the powers on those tech trees feel like there's a bit more oomph going on, even though from a beginner's perspective, having a look at those different options that are available to you could be overwhelming because there are so many options and they are quite wordy. So there's a lot to read there. But personally, I'm a big fan of those tech trees. So you probably figured it out by now. For me, Ankh Gods of Egypt is the winner in this Clash of Titans. The next face-off we have is Wingspan versus Earth. Now, both of these games are nature themed. Both of them are card tableau style games where you're trying to build up a card tableau in front of you, and where the positioning of those cards is very important. Where these two games differ is, I would say Wingspan is more the simpler of the two. Wingspan has very straightforward actions that you're following through with, which get better as the game goes on. Having more birds on your tableau increases the power of each of your actions. Earth, on the other hand, has a different way to carry out its actions. One player at a time will be choosing a particular action, but everyone else will also get a benefit from that action. And the card tableau, the ordering of where you place cards is crucial. You want to be activating abilities in the right sequential order so you can activate other different abilities. It's very tricky to get that right, and cards care about where they're positioned. You need to have cards in the right row or column, and it can be quite frustrating and stressful because there's just so many cards. You'll also have a ton of cards in your hand. Now, I've only played Earth the one time. With my game of Earth, I was able to see why people might like the game. But for me personally, there's something to be said about the simplicity of Wingspan. I really enjoy the action economy in that game. And it's a game that I've played so many times, it's just become comfort food to me. It's a go-to game for me, nice and easy to get to, and I'm quite happy to play it any time. Although, I would be willing to give Earth a second chance and try it again in the future. All right, but for me, it's Wingspan that's gonna win this round. The next clash is between It's a Wonderful World and Seven Wonders. Both of these very popular card drafting games, but which one has the edge? Let's talk about It's a Wonderful World first. This game will have you drafting cards which you can either discard to gain cubes, or you'll be committing to build them in front of you. Now, as you build these cards, you'll be stockpiling cubes upon them. And then once you've completed them, they go onto your card row and they're producing resources for you every turn. Now, I quite like the tactile nature of all the cubes and placing them all your cards and trying to really think ahead, because this game is very thinky. You really need to understand how many cubes you have available to you. Are you going to be able to fulfill cards that you've committed to building? Because once you place them out there, you can't take them back. And having cards out there that you can't build is a massive waste. It really lets down your engine if you manage to make some mistakes there. So in that way, it's a really unforgiving type of game. Whereas on the other hand, Seven Wonders is a bit more friendlier in that respect, and there's a little bit more going on as well. You'll have cards that you can draft. Some of them are just straight up points. Some of them are resources that you use to construct cards. And some of them will have an army symbol on there. And you're using these armies to try and beat down your opponents that are next to you. You'll be gaining points, but also bringing down their score at the same time. And you also have to be wary of the science cards. Science cards are these cards that you can get a lot of points from if people don't take them away from you. Having just a couple of them, not so bad, but once you build up a lot of them, then it gets really problematic there. So which of these games is my favorite? Well, it's a tough one. But personally, I really like the tactile feel of It's a Wonderful World. I really like the thinkiness, trying to figure out, okay, exactly how am I gonna make this work? From turn to turn, deciding which exactly cards am I gonna take to just dump away to get the cubes that I need to pay for other cards. That thinky sort of nature I enjoy a little bit more, so for me, It's a Wonderful World takes the win. It's time for our final battle, and this is between Inis and Blood Rage. Inis and Blood Rage are both area conflict style games where you're drafting cards to determine what you can do. Blood Rage is based on the Norse mythology, while Inis is the Celtic mythology. Now, where do these games differ? Well, Blood Rage, when you're drafting cards, these cards will be placed in front of you, and these sort of determine asymmetry between the players. You'll have your own abilities available to you, and you'll be having your own play style that will develop over time. It's much easier to get into fights, and it's much easier to control what you want to do, as the cards that you draft are usually used for battle or for upgrading your tableau, as I talked about before. Whereas Inis, only the actions that you have available to you are on the cards. You have limited freedom when it comes to what you can do. And it's all determined by those cards that you draft. So it takes a lot of foresight to figure out, what do I actually need this round, and what should I try and take away from my opponent so that they can't pull off their win. I think that personally Blood Rage has a very big runaway winner problem. And it's very easy to leap far ahead, particularly when someone gets the low-key strategy cards. Now, when I say low-key strategy cards, if you've not heard of these cards before, these cards reward you for jumping into fights and losing your miniatures. And it's quite easy to do this. So if someone allows you to take all those cards, you're getting massive boons of points, and no one can really keep up with you. That's something that I've noticed about Blood Rage. If people at the table are not aware of this low-key strategy and don't draft to stop it, it gets out of hand very quickly. I also felt with Blood Rage that some of the cards, they feel a bit samey after consecutive plays. They don't feel as special or amazing, but I have played this game quite a bit, so perhaps that's just me sort of cooling off on the game. Whereas Inis, I really like the thinkiness of the cards and, you know, trying to work out what cards I really need, because that's the aim of the game, drafting all the cards that you really need to be able to pull off the turns that you want. And yeah, I just really like it. Although I think Blood Rage definitely has the edge when it comes to miniatures. The miniatures in Blood Rage, really nice. Ankh still has the lead on that one, but still, those Blood Rage minis are really nice as well. So with that all said, it's a tough one. I do enjoy both these games. I think I've cooled a little bit on Blood Rage, but for me personally, I'm gonna go with Inis. Now, either one of these games you could be happy with. And that's the same with all these games actually. All these games on this list are fine games. And this was just a bit of a fun sort of thing where I'm comparing both the games and giving you my personal preference when it comes to them. But honestly, I'd be happy to play any of these games really. All right, well, what do you think? What other games should be paired against each other in an epic conflict? If you let me know, I might make another one of these videos. All right, thanks guys, have a good one.